Thank you. Hey, that's it! We don't need the clapping. Go ahead.
On a Lockwood 91 Main Street.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you a stool, too.
There you go. So if it's simply not on this election, but our next regular election is going to be next May for town elections, or next November. So whatever we vote here, it's going to be on one of those elections. Is that correct? I mean, we're not giving up.
It can be on the ballot anytime they want to do it.
Okay, all right. So it's not. So we are going to vote on this. But one thing is, I think you're saying we're not going to vote, Ms. Adams? You're shaking your head.
Pardon? Who's shaking?
Oh,
I'm not shaking my head.
Are we going to? Our decision here will be eventually on a ballot.
Eventually.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, assuming they call for a ballot, you're right. I mean, they may decide to never vote on it. Assuming they do vote on it, then it would be on a ballot on some future date.
Okay. My question is, I think we have voted on a moratorium, and I don't know when that moratorium expires. End of June. So then, if we, I don't know when, but if that moratorium expires and we don't have that on the ballot, then a lot can happen if the election is the ballot question is delayed past June. Is that correct?
Talk about the moratorium, Mr. Bernie.
So, the moratorium expires at the end of this month. Article 25 looks to delete the moratorium and replace it with the regulatory bylaw. I would expect that even if we attempted to extend the moratorium, we would not receive a favorable reply from the Attorney General based on other actions that they've taken over the past 6 or 8 months.
Okay.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So although it's not on the ballot, we need to somehow find a way to vote on these articles before the end of May. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. Is that correct?
We have to at least vote on 25 if you want some regulation.
So
correct.
So although there is no limit on when we can bring that to the vote, if we don't take action, it doesn't matter. Comes May 31st.
Take action in which respect?
Well, we have a moratorium that prohibits the sale and cultivation in Lunenburg.
Correct.
That
Till the end of the month.
Expires at the end of the month.
Correct.
But if we don't have any laws enacted by the end of the month, no matter that we voted here, because there will be a period of time that Lunenburg is not going to have a moratorium or laws in place.
That's correct. If you pass Article 25, there is a regulatory bylaw in place. If Article 25 fails, then we're...
But doesn't Article 25 needs to go to the ballot?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was the part was left off. Go ahead.
Tom Alonso, 284 Lancaster Avenue. As I try to decide whether I'm for the latest amendment or not, I have 2 technical questions for Town Council through you, Mr. Moderator. Number 1 is, I know sometimes that you cannot put local initiative questions on state ballots, but this is an off year. Is this allowed? Is these kind of questions allowed if we don't do a special election, but we have a state, whatever the November election is, can these go on there? That's question 1.
Let's get that one first.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So indications, let me first say, the marijuana legislation, as you all know, is quite new. And so I'm not sure if this exact circumstance, with an effort to get something onto the election ballot that didn't make its way onto the election ballot and yet was voted upon at town meeting, has occurred before. I do know the following. I know, number 1, that the sequence doesn't matter. There are communities that have voted it at the ballot, and then they've gone to town meeting. There are other communities that have gone to town meeting, and then they voted it at the ballot. I'm looking here at the legislation, which is 50 or so pages long. I'm looking at the regulations, which are another 50 or so pages long. I see nothing in the regulations that I'm familiar with or that I see here in front of me now that either places a limitation upon the timing or that says anything other than, including the guidance documents, that this can either be on a regular or a special election. It doesn't say it has to be a regular election.
Okay, so then question number 2, because I think the intent of removing this is people feel they're not getting a right to vote on the moratorium. In this period of time between step 1 and 2, whatever order they come in our case, town meeting and then the ballot, while it is pending that the town meeting voted in favor of prohibition, but before the ballot question is voted on, can the town legally block any application until that is resolved?
Again, through you, Mr. Moderator. So that's somewhat of a complicated question because of the term, can the town block it? The answer is if there's no moratorium in effect, then there's no prohibition in effect, and therefore nothing would prevent an applicant from coming forward and making an application under your existing zoning. With that being said, it's not quite that simple. The way that the legislation is written, first and foremost, there needs to be a host community agreement that is negotiated with the Board of Selectmen. That has to occur before, even once your zoning is in effect, if you choose not to adopt the marijuana ban, either here at town meeting or at the ballot box, and you choose to regulate it instead consistent with Article 25, even once that Article 25 is in effect, a marijuana cultivator, a marijuana retailer that might find itself in the appropriate zoning district that would want to come forward with a zoning application still needs to come to the Board of Selectmen and get the Board of Selectmen to vote in favor of a host community agreement. If that host community agreement is rejected, then that application cannot proceed. So it's not quite the sort of free-for-all that's been suggested. I'm not saying that it should give you complete comfort. There's no prohibition on an application if there's not a marijuana moratorium in effect during that period of time between town meeting vote and ballot vote.
So, Mr. Moderator, with that being said, I am not for the amendment because I think two things are true. First of all, with what town council said, we still have a lot of control in town, number one. Number two, when it was raised to 500, one of the previous speakers who made the motion to move it to 500 feet indicated that with the lot size available, we're talking about maybe 15 lots or 20 some odd lots in town. And number three, I think that we have the ability still to have the question. If it passes 26 or anything past that passes, I'll go on the faith of what Mr. McQuaid already said, that if the town votes for it, he'd be for it. I'm assuming there are other members of the board who would do that, who would vote for a special election, and if we need to, we should have that special election. So I'd be against this amendment.
Okay. Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, two comments. The
Your
first
name
is
again.
Michael Ray Jeffries, 1170 Massachusetts Avenue.
I do that because we're recording it.
Certainly.
People need to hear it, so go ahead.
I'd argue that I think everyone in here knows my name, but no. So, Mr. Moderator, two comments in relation to this proposed amendment. The first is that if we remove marijuana cultivation, recreational marijuana cultivation, from residential districts, and the entirety of the article passes, and it's not prohibited in coming up articles, then what we have on the books is medical marijuana at 500 feet. And I think I'm pretty reasonable in assuming that there is no one that's going to go into the medical marijuana market space going forward, that it's going to be a combination of medical and recreational marijuana. So I would urge against that. The second thing, Mr. Moderator, is and this is a comment in general, is that in this legislative meeting, I would ask that, let me step back for a second. As a resident of Lunenburg, I understand that we all have different roles. And in this legislative role, I think it's very important for all the residents. This is our one legislative section on the books of the year for us to get up and have our voices heard. On the opposite end of that is the Board of Selectmen. You guys meet every month, twice a month, 3 times a month. And I would ask that as a body, that I would expect that the Board of Selectmen would be able to come to these meetings and have recommendations as a body, and that if they want to offer a ton of opinions, that we've already heard in their meetings, that I would ask them that they stand on this side and join the legislative portion of the body. That's my only comment, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you for your comments. I'm not going to change that, though. Go ahead.
John Whalen, 526 West Townsend Road.
Get closer to the mic, please.
I think everybody knows by now who I am. Mr. Moderator, could you please maybe ask Town Council? This is an odd situation here, and I'm not really talking about marijuana at this point. It's just looking at the facts. If the Board of Selectmen had voted to put this on the ballot, and it was not on the ballot, they've already had that vote that said it should be on the ballot. Now, the next standard election, as Mr. Alonso said earlier, if that's in November and it's able to be put on that ballot, could we have an assurance right now, maybe even as an addendum here or an amendment to this motion, that that will be on the November ballot for a vote, so at least we don't have to leave this room today wondering if they will ever vote to put it on the ballot. But based on the fact they've already asked it to be on the ballot and it did not get printed, can that be applied to the next election where I believe is coming up in November?
Town Council, was the vote of the Board of Selectmen to put it on the May ballot binding on them to put it on a future ballot?
No.
Okay. And you're going to change the complexion of the board in a couple weeks. So that's your answer. Okay. Hold on. I got to call on people. Got to keep control of this meeting somehow. Mr. Menard.
Chris Menard, 672 Page Street. I guess just a question. Board of Selectmen's in session. Could they not right now call for a special election?
They could. You could move that they take a vote, I suppose. I don't know.
So moved.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec.
Mr. Moderator, if I can ask the Town Council, this was clearly an error. I believe that we would vote right now 4-0 to put it on the next available election, and I'd be happy to do that. Can we do it now, or do we have to put it on the agenda of a selectman meeting?
An open public meeting.
Through you, Mr. Moderator.
Go ahead.
No, this is...
So I know. I heard a comment about posting the meeting. I'm not concerned about the posting because it's a town meeting and there's an exemption for that. I am somewhat concerned, and I'm not recommending against that vote. Certainly it was unanticipated. The issue is that there's obviously no agenda posted for the meeting that's now underway that references a potential vote. However, again, it's left generally to the discretion of the chair to determine what items are reasonably anticipated or unanticipated. I think it's fair to say that none of us anticipated this until a few moments ago. So, again, I defer to the chair. But if, in the chair's estimation, this was unanticipated, yes, a vote could occur at this moment.
I will accept a motion to put it on the next available ballot once we figure out when that is.
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion?
Sure. I would say you said next available election. I will say that we should be doing this as we would confirm to them that we would call a special election, because next available election is vague. It may be November, and to my understanding, this can't be on a state election. And we'd have to check with town council. That may make the next available election that's scheduled next May for Lunenburg.
As soon as possible.
So I'm just saying I would like to ask for a change to the motion to be that we would call a special election for Prohibition.
I guess I would want to know what the cost of a special election is.
And there you have it, folks. We may not actually have one.
So you guys have a motion on the floor. Are you asking somebody to inform you as to the cost of that? Maybe
Did I make the
can
motion?
Tell us. What's it going to cost them if they run a special election?
Oh, okay.
Kathy, what is it going to cost us if we have a special election? $5,000.
Mr. Moderator, through town council, is it possible to put it on the November ballot? Is there any reason we couldn't put it on the November ballot?
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So I'm also not certain whether this is a question that can go on to a state election. There are a variety of restrictions that exist with respect to certain initiative questions as to whether they can be placed, or referendum questions as to whether they can be placed on a state versus a municipal ballot. So I need to confirm whether it can or can't. I can't tell you on the spot.
And if we couldn't be on this, could you have a special election that same day? You know, using the same people, a different box or something, you know what I mean? So that you did it at the same time so it was cheaper?
And so through you, Mr. Moderator, so you can do that, but it can't be part of the same ballot. So there's some complication there. We can talk through that. But there's certainly a way to make it happen, whether it be sooner than that or in November.
So in that case, the latest would be November, right?
I suppose so.
Right.
So you guys have to, okay, you're discussing amongst yourselves.
Okay,
not me.
Mr. Chair, if I may, for further discussion, I think a follow-up question for town council is if this gets deferred to November election, which I'm not even sure if we know that it could be, between now and then all we have is the bylaw that passes today. And therefore, it goes back to the amendment on the floor, which is to be more restrictive now, which I would support everyone vote for the amendment to be restrictive. In regards to residential zoning, there's a lot of unintended consequences if you haven't studied this closely in terms of what would happen between now and the potential future election. So we have an amendment on the floor to be more restrictive by restricting it in residential. So I think bringing it back to that, we need to make sure we support that amendment. And in regards to...
I think what's on the floor is you guys deciding if you're going to...
Sure, I was just wrapping that up. In regards to our discussion in terms of a motion to put this on at a future election, I would like to again encourage for the folks of everybody out there that you only are confirmed that this will happen if our vote we take now is to call a special election, say in June, for the prohibition articles. Then you know that you're getting one. If not, it's just as vague as it is now.
So, where you at, Selectman?
I have no idea what's going on. I heard a motion that we will call a special election as soon as we possibly can, once we figure out what it takes. Then I heard some discussion around it would cost $5,000. If we're not able to piggyback it with an existing election.
But it sounds like we could piggyback it in November. It will cost more than nothing, but it won't cost the whole $5,000 because you have all the people in place and, you know, you have the whole election going.
So what's the motion?
I'd make a motion that we make sure it's on the ballot in November.
And just double check with town council, I know I've heard that it cannot be on a state ballot, and so we may not be able to do it in November. That's
not what he said.
But it's what I remember learning, and I don't know where, and we're kind of researching it.
We don't have an election.
I'd make an alternative motion that if we can put it on the November ballot, we'll put it on the November ballot. If not, we'll call a special election.
Time out. Okay. You can vote on it in a moment. Ms. Herrick wants you to know that there is no election in November in Lunenburg.
Thank you. Thank you.
There is now.
Well, come over here so you can hear him.
Mr.
Selectman, give me something.
Mr. Moderator?
Hold on. I'm going to get the selectmen to get you an answer about whether or not there's going to be an election.
Well, okay.
Mrs. Luck, you have a motion.
Sounds like there's no...
We can't hear you, Ms. Luck.
Well, it's just our luck. There's no election in November.
Or you could call one in November.
Why no? For the sake of discussion, if we have to call one and have a cost to it, where this was intended to be on the ballot in 2 weeks, I think our special election should occur as soon as possible. But with all of this confusion, just another plug for the amendment.
I'm really interested to hear what the people vote on for the prohibitions here. Number one, because and also the only reason again, very unfortunate it's not on the ballot. I really wish it were. The only reason I would not want a special one is because I want people to actually, the whole point of this is so people show up and weigh their opinion and we can do what the town wants to do. You don't get the cross-section of people in a special election that you do with a normal one. That's my only reservation there.
Okay, but you've got a meeting within this meeting. So we need a vote on whatever is before your board for a vote so we can tell the people. We can't hear you, Ms. Luck. It's a public meeting.
Okay, we're discussing putting it on the ballot in May when we know we'll have an election.
While they're discussing, may I speak to this group? No?
You may not.
I'm still waiting for a motion that's seconded.
We have
a
one.
motion to put it on the ballot in May, then I'd take it.
All right.
So we have a motion to put it on the ballot in May.
This May?
No, I want to ask.
We can't. Next May. Oh, boy.
I don't remember your motion. For proof. Wait.
Can we do our motion very clearly so that even what is our motion that we're
Make a
offering?
motion that if the prohibition articles pass here, right, then we have we put them on the ballot next May, which is the next time we would have a regular election, just for the sake of saving the $5,000.
So that leaves us with only whatever bylaw we pass today, which means that somebody can come into town under that current bylaw for an entire year. So this bylaw becomes extremely important. And then for some reason, I feel like there was a timeline between town meeting and bringing it to an election, and it seems to stick with me, but I don't recall. It's just something I feel like I heard. So I feel like there's a lot of unknown involving this situation. So Article 25 should be as restrictive as possible if you support prohibition. That's all we know for sure.
Can I ask a question of the Board of Selectmen meeting that's going on now?
Actually, you could.
It's actually not your call, I think it's
public
Mr.
comment
Toll's.
section of the Board of Selectmen's meeting, but it's not. Sir, I understand he's standing in line, and I understand you think it's important that he speak, but I have to call the meeting the way I call the meeting. Thank you much. Board of Selectmen.
Okay, we have a motion that has been seconded to have a special election.
Not a special election.
Put it on the May ballot of next year so it doesn't cost any additional money.
And we get a bigger, and so the wider cross-section of people can weigh in, is my concern.
I think we've had plenty of discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay. So you have a vote at the Board of Selectmen that there will be an election or a vote rather, cross town for Articles 26 through 31 and 32, whatever it is. 25 is not on the ballot, and it's separate. Now, I understand, Mr. Buckerview, you've got to talk.
So I think I still have the floor.
I have a point. Why?
Who has the floor?
Were you noticed?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, that's okay. I asked.
Oh.
I don't know how anybody keeps it straight. Mr. Menard.
So just another question. Is it not possible to reprint the ballots for this?
All right.
May I piggyback?
I make a selectman's
Hold
motion. We
on.
have our
That's
ballots
Ms. Herrick.
reprinted.
It's Ms. Adams. Wait a minute. That's Ms. Herrick's
It's
domain.
not possible to reprint. People have already voted absentee.
Oh.
There you go. You ready to sit down? You want to keep going?
No, I do want to keep going.
What time is your dinner tonight? Go ahead.
Freedom has no limit.
Yes. Given all that, I do support now changing SP-PBs to dashes. Next year's town meeting can attempt to put them back on prior to next year's vote of the following articles. And I also want to say, there's a lot of talk about marijuana being legal. It's not legal. And for anyone out there that ever wants a federal job or wants to be a contractor for a federal employee, you will be fired if you partake in this Massachusetts legal activity.
Good. Let's stay away from whether we like marijuana or not.
It's not about whether we like marijuana. It's about the fact that it's not legal.
Really want to get out of here before dark. Mr. Parkerview.
I don't want to be repetitive, but I agree. Take them off now, put them back on in May.
Excellent. Nice
That's how we
and
deal
quick.
with the $5,000.
Nice and quick. Mr. Locke, everybody try to keep it to 30 seconds. Let's go.
Yeah, Nathan Lockwood, 91 Main Street. If we were to remove the residential and the outlying districts is possible cultivation districts, which I don't support, I think we should leave them on. But given the fact that as shown on the map, we have very little commercial and industrial sites, would we be opening ourselves to legal challenge by the fact that our regulation is effectively a prohibition? I know we've seen that with other things.
Town council, do you have an opinion? do you have an opinion of whether or not we open ourselves up to litigation if we effectively prohibit by removing those setback restrictions?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So there's always that possibility, and I'm not a planner, so I don't have sufficient information about the parcels that exist in the locations where these facilities could potentially be located. When cross-referenced or superimposed with the various setbacks that are a part of the proposed regulation, to know whether it amounts to an effective prohibition. The language of the statute and regulations is that you can't adopt a bylaw that makes it unreasonably impracticable to locate these facilities in somewhere within your community. Otherwise, you have to do it by way of a ban. You can't circumvent the sort of tedious process of adopting a ban both at town meeting and at the ballot box by simply adopting zoning that isn't really zoning at all because it effectively prohibits the use. I don't have enough information, and it's outside of my wheelhouse to tell you whether tinkering with a few setbacks or eliminating it from one particular district, one type of establishment from one particular district and not another, means that you're effectively prohibiting the use.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. I'm watching everybody here. Everybody who's speaking is going to be required to stay here until we end this meeting. We can talk forever, I promise you, but nobody, Chief, block the door.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to, so thanks for answering that question. So in the event, let's say that a lawsuit was brought and a determination was made that our regulations constituted a ban, then my understanding is our regulations would essentially be thrown out and we would lose any effective regulation.
Town Council, we're going to keep going.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. So again, that's a difficult question. To suggest that if there were to be a lawsuit brought challenging the applicability of a bylaw on the basis that that bylaw is an effective prohibition would result in the entire bylaw being thrown out, we're sort of taking a few steps there. It depends. A judge could do anything. Typically, the case that's before the judge would be that particular application, that particular applicant, and it would have to be litigated over a period of years probably, and in the interim, you could attempt to address the issue. So that's a complicated question, but you are correct in the general premise that if there were to be a challenge and a judge were to review the bylaw and determine that it effectively prohibits these uses within the community, and you didn't follow the proper process to do so, that at least with respect to that case, and probably generally speaking, your bylaw would be deemed invalid and you'd be back to square one.
Okay. Mr. Cole, no, listen. You're the moving party on the motion. So I'm going to let Mr. Prokofiev have the last word on the motion, and and then I'll let you speak because it's your motion, and then we're going to vote. Go ahead.
Yeah, as a member of the planning board, I've seen that play out, and there's a lot of what-if games that you can play with your bylaws, but you got to come up with something. It's going to take the court system years to process one complaint, and in that time, I mean, we're looking at 1 year, until we know whether we get this thing on the ballot or not, and what happens next. So it's really not a very poignant question.
Why does everybody have one little thing they need to say? Bernie, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Point of clarification, and town council can correct me if I'm wrong. The rule is unreasonably impracticable, not unreasonable to happen. The area down here is an enormous collection of large tracts of land, currently owned by several landowners. So could these facilities be built on those? Yes, it is something that the planning board looked at. Is it unlikely? No one knows because those landowners may or may not sell. So we're talking about hundreds of acres on each of these parcels and depths of hundreds of feet. So again, not an attorney, but there are parcels that fall within the zoning district that allow for facilities to be constructed within the setbacks put forward. Not for or against the amendment, just a point of information.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, final word on your motion.
Just for a point of clarification, that gray industrial, the gray industrial district, my knowledge is that's over 1,000 acres of land down there, just to provide some perspective for people. So it's not like there isn't an opportunity there. And with that, I'd like to move the question.
How novel. So what you're moving is the motion. So the motion, if somebody can put it back up, was whatever sections it was, the 375, there'd be 0, straight across. Thank you. 4.10, parentheses 1.
No, the motion is to remove these three.
Right. That's what I just said. These three columns, remove them to be 0, right? Correct? Dashes. Zeros. Dashes. Thank you much. Okay. It's a majority. All those in favor of making those three columns dashes, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It's defeated. I knew you were going to doubt it. I'm just playing games with you. Bring my counters down. We need counters because 7 people like to count.
Mine stays in my pocket.
They hate to feel like they lost.
Mine stays in my pocket the whole meeting.
Nobody believes me anymore.
What's that?
Okay, on the motion to make those 3 columns dashes, just on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, hold up your cards. If you're too tired to hold up your card, have somebody hold your arm up or something. It has been a very long day. It's not almost over. I know. That's all right. I'm not embarrassed. Mr. Como. 1-6? 1-6 on my left, 10 in the middle. Say it.
32.
32. Okay. If you are opposed to the motion, which would make dashes, put your cards up. Next time I'm having the ladies' club bring dinner. 19 on my left, 17 in the middle,
13.
13 on my right. Motions are by majority. Ms. Herrick.
Yes, 58, no, 49.
Yes, 58, no, 49. The amendment, the motion to amend passes. So those 3 columns now have dashes, not zeros, dashes. We don't need that. Thank you. So now we have the whole article before you, Article 25. I think Mr. Barney and everybody understood. You got to have something, or you'll have no regulation. Good. Nobody at the mic. Oh, Carl, please. Go ahead.
I warned you, Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I warned you I had questions.
You
on the
can't
motion.
leave early. I'm telling you right now.
I'm not. I promise I won't. I have a question on social consumption, and I'm not sure where that is in the legislation. I know it's not a use yet, but the commission is working on it, and it will happen. It's probably one of the more interesting uses to a lot of people, and I'm concerned that this bylaw prohibits it, just flat out prohibits it. So that seems inconsistent with what I hear, that you can't prohibit a use in your bylaw. And it seems, why would we prohibit that use, which may be one of the more interesting, I mean, one of our biggest tax and revenue incomes in town, or, you know, liquor, bars, restaurants. That looks like a good one. So why would we prohibit that?
The thinking and discussion was that there are no regulations or rules regarding social consumption. And
what is social consumption?
Social consumption is when everybody goes to a fixed location and consumes marijuana together in a big old happy cloud of smoke. So there is an establishment in the city of Worcester that requires a membership for you to be able to come in and consume marijuana within the confines of this business. They don't sell marijuana, but they allow members to consume on site. And I think that some of the thought was, without some significant regulation or thought into how that would happen, it is something that would be better left prohibited at this time. I expect that upon the Cannabis Control Commission executing the pilot that they're currently undertaking with volunteer communities to roll out a social consumption program, they will establish a definition and use and regulations that would attach thereto, and I would expect that to be a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line before it's widely rolled out. And I think at that time, the planning board would be looking to amend the bylaw. I think that through this entire process, the planning board has recognized that this is an industry in its infancy. There is a lot of questions. It was brought up earlier about craft cultivation and micro businesses. We went through a lot of effort tracking down cannabis control commissioners and staff, looking for information on craft cultivators. My understanding is that to this day they still have not permitted one. So what that permitting looks like, what the structure of one of those establishments might look like, is still up in the air. The board at one time was looking to specifically regulate
Mr. Bernie,
that.
we really need to keep it
Sorry.
focused on social
And so-
consumption. We could talk about marijuana forever, and we might.
There's an understanding that this is going to evolve over time, and that the board would be back with proposed amendments to catch up with what the regulations at the state level have evolved to.
Thanks. Sir.
Tanner Cole, Massachusetts Avenue. I'd like to move the question.
You only want it the mic anyway, so let's do it. Seconded. Great. We're not going to have to vote on moving it because we are going to vote on it, okay? So forget moving it. You're voting on whether or not you approve Article 25 as it's been amended with dashes in those 3 columns, okay? So all those in favor of Article 25, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, so it passes by 2/3, and I declare it. Mr. Bernie, let's go through the rest of them. Oh, you get up to the microphone unless it's a procedural point of law and you think I did something wrong, and boy, you're not leaving early. Lived here all his life. Go ahead.
Just a point of information, or
Go ahead.
I'm going to run something by you. Would you entertain a motion to recess this meeting at the end of Article, I've lost my count, 31, I'm sorry, 32, and reconvene on Monday for the balance of the articles? Because I have the sneaking suspicion that when these next articles are passed, there's going to be a mass exodus.
Well, that was nice.
And the people that worked on the planning board and the town bylaw committee are going to be talking to nobody.
I tell you what, Mr. Chapdelaine, I asked the chief to block the door. Nobody leaves. We're going to get through this meeting tonight. The problem with doing it on Monday, and I had suggested we have certain articles and certain nights, that was defeated by a majority of people that didn't think that was a great idea. So we're going to get through this tonight. Nobody leaves. We're going to do it. Keep your comments and your motions and your amendments succinct, okay? 26.
I move the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 250.4.1 by inserting 250.4.10 parenthetical 1 entitled Marijuana Cultivator, including the accompanying footnote 3 and definition of marijuana cultivator as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Is there a second? Selectman, your recommendation.
Board of Selectmen does not recommend approval.
Thank you. Finance Committee. Hello, you there?
We're taking a poll. I'm sorry.
I thought you were asleep.
We are 4 to 3. God, was that for prohibition? Or against? So we're basically, we're not, we're not recommending approval. 4-3.
You're against. Got it. Planning Board, what was your recommendation?
3-0 in favor,
3-0
to recommend.
in favor. Okay, let's get through them one at a time. 26, marijuana cultivator prohibition.
So this would prohibit marijuana cultivators.
Oh, there you go, short and sweet. Nobody up at the microphone? Oh, I knew it, Carl. I just knew it. Phyllis, leave him home next year. Go ahead.
Invited me. They're all the same to me, and I suspect that people here already made up their minds anyway. But I did want to point out a couple of things that were maybe not real clear from the presentation regarding this. I mean, to begin with, this is legal in Massachusetts. It's on our doorstep. There's retail shop going on the town line. It's going to happen all around us. So all of the bad things that the chief identified, if they come true, they're going to come true anyway. So my point is, we really should consider this is a potential huge revenue source for the town, and some of those revenues, by definition, are impact revenues that can be used to deal with some of the things the chief's talking about, extra details, extra equipment, whatever we need. So I don't think we should take this lightly in terms of, what are we really doing other than maybe cutting our nose off to spite our face financially. Retail, we get 3% sales tax additional, and that can be huge. I mean, we heard some numbers flying around here. These host community agreements, 3% impact tax is the norm right now. The commission has even said that they're not going to question anything other than 3% because nobody knows what the impact is, so they're allowing every town to go up to the full 3% of tax. And we heard there's millions of dollars going to be in these buildings that we won't even know what's in them, and they'll just be turning over revenues for us. On top of that, there's in the host community agreement, there's an ability to negotiate additional revenue from these companies. We had one on our doorstep, a year ago or more ago, who wanted to put in, who was thinking about putting in a cultivation that was going to pay the town $1 a square foot. And he was talking about a 400,000 square foot building, and that was just the start of the negotiation. So there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue that could come to this town with these, if we don't prohibit. And all we're doing is prohibit is we're pushing them to the next town. So I think we need to take that into account. I don't think it's going to change who uses marijuana, who doesn't, who drives through town, who doesn't drive through town, whether we prohibit it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Ted Turner, 322 Northfield. I'm just thinking brain on drugs. It's bad to allow our young people to have their brains, chemistry, seriously altered for the sake of extra revenues to the town of Lunenburg. And it's inconsistent to be raising tax revenues on an activity and then to argue to use those tax revenues to try to cure the effects of that activity. That makes no sense at all to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Prokofiev, this is something you haven't spoken on 3 times. Please, go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It doesn't say exactly on that slide what's going to happen.
It's a prohibition on marijuana cultivation.
Right. I move the town, move to blah, 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 entitled marijuana cultivator, including accompanying footnote 3, which is...
Footnote 3 essentially says that per 96G, section 1, it's prohibited upon the affirmative ballot vote. So it would place this within this passage of this article would place that footnote on the use table so that at such time as the ballot was voted on, if it were affirmative, that would be the reaffirmation.
Effective only upon passage by the voters at a regular or special town election.
There you go. Ms. Adams, sure.
Okay, thank you. I've been advocating for prohibition of marijuana in town for almost a few years now, and so it sort of goes in line with what the previous speaker said. The state voted to legalize it, which a lot of people supported in the sense of decriminalizing the use of marijuana. What we have before us now with these uses and why I support prohibition, which is a yes vote on these articles, is because what you're seeing is a commercialization of drug use. And even though marijuana and opioids are very, very different, the opioid crisis was born out of the commercialization of opioids and pain management, in particular Purdue Pharmaceutical. And if you go and Google that and search all those things, a lot of those pharmaceutical companies have been legally responsible for commercializing and marketing the use of drugs. And in this case, I just see this as a pathway for people to make revenue, which increases the amount of taxes we get, but we're making that revenue and increasing that amount of money coming in by increasing drug use in town. So we'll have more money to give to the schools, but we'll have more people on drugs. So I just would rather prohibit it as a message of non-drug use. My DARE officers here say no to drugs, right? Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mike
Clark, 275 Cross Road. I would speculate we probably already have a significant marijuana problem in our schools. I don't know. I don't think we need data to back that up. So I wonder, do you have any data on us in Lunenburg, municipality by municipality, banning marijuana cultivation, that we will see a decrease in high school population drug use?
I do not have any data that would support that or refute it.
Okay. And then the second thing is, are we in a position to refuse to take any revenue from gambling proceeds in town too that would go from our schools?
That's kind of way outside the scope of what we're talking about today, and I'm really trying to get us through tonight.
It isn't, because you're keying this discussion to health-related issues and whether we want to use revenue from things we feel impact the health of our individuals and students, and yet we have many areas that we already imbibe in that, gambling.
Not going to get into gambling, Mr. Clark. Let's keep
I'm
on focused.
not discussing gambling. There's an analogy. We're willing to take revenue from other areas that cause significant mental health issues. And so I don't think that the argument that we don't want to take revenue from this is relevant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
I motion to move this. How long?
Say it again.
Motion to move the question.
Move the question. Okay? There's the second. Okay? That's not debatable. All those in favor of ending the discussion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Everybody wants to move it, you see, until everybody wants to keep talking. Okay, Article 26 is a prohibition on cultivation. I believe this is a majority, two-thirds vote. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Counters? Bring down the counters. Because you know if I declare it, somebody's going to stand. Okay? If you're in favor of prohibiting marijuana cultivation, please hold up your card. In favor of the prohibition. It's a two-thirds vote. Mr. Como, how many you got in favor? 1-5? 1-5 on my left. 12 in the center.
25.
25 on the right and stage. If you're opposed to prohibition marijuana cultivation, raise your card. You ready with that calculator, Ms. Herrick? Everybody else has got theirs out. On my left, Mr. Como, 14. Center, 15. Mr. Hartenstein, nice to see you.
Cards up again.
Cards up again. Opposed.
We had a different count.
Yeah.
$14.
14. Requires 2/3, Ms. Herrick.
I saw that.
Go ahead. You got a microphone. Tell them. Go ahead.
The article is defeated. There were 95 votes, and it needed 64 to pass. It was 52 yes, 43 no.
Okay. Article's defeated. Article 27. Mr. Bernie, read it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I saw one of my members getting up. I thought he was going to read it. I move to vote the town. I move the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 254.1 by inserting a new Section 254.10, parenthetical 2, entitled Marijuana Product Manufacturer, including the accompanying footnote 4 and definition of marijuana product manufacturer as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Excellent. Is there a second? Second. Gotta be. Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen does not recommend approval.
Recommends disapproval. Finance Committee. Finance Committee recommends approval. Planning Board.
Recommends approval 3-0.
3-0.
By way of information, this is to prohibit marijuana product manufacturers. Footnote 4 is the same as footnote 3 with the substitution of marijuana cultivator for marijuana product manufacturer.
Requires a 2/3 vote. Ms. Bertram.
I just want to point out...
Who are you?
Paula Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. I just want to point out that by passing this, you're not necessarily prohibiting, but you're allowing it to be taken to a vote at a special election.
No one's at the microphone. We're ready to vote on product manufacturer prohibition. Article 27, 2/3. All those in favor of the prohibition, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. The noes have it. The article is not passed. 7 doubts. Vote by hand. Come on down. I think these votes are going to get similar after a while, all you doubters. Okay, if you are in favor of this prohibition, please raise your card. Mr. Como on my left, 17. Again, 2/3. Oh yeah, you need to be on the front if you're voting up here, because then you're not voting. Okay. Because it'll get confusing if you're in the center or on the right. In the middle. 9. Mr. Levesque.
27.
27. All those opposed to Article 27, please raise your card. Two-thirds. Mr. Como, 12 on my left. In the middle. 18.
12.
12. 12. Requires 2/3, Ms. Herrick. Very little difference.
This one is defeated as well.
Defeated.
53 yes, 42 no, for a total of 95. So it failed.
Article 28, marijuana testing facilities.
I move that the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 250.4.1 by inserting a new section, 250.4.10, parenthetical 3, entitled Marijuana Testing Facility, including the accompanying footnote 5 and definition of marijuana testing facility as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Is there a second? Second. Selectmen.
Don't recommend approval.
Finance.
We don't either.
All right. Planning.
Recommends approval unanimously.
Approval of a prohibition. Okay, 28, another prohibition. Go ahead.
Chris Menard, 672 Page Street. Before we just go along thinking marijuana is great across the board, I want to remind everyone that I believe it was a marijuana testing facility which was recently shut down. However, the damage was done with discarding in an open dumpster marijuana. So, it's fine to pass some of these, but let's think through some of them. And I don't think a marijuana testing facility is really what we want in Lunenburg. Thanks.
Thank you. Declare that we're ready to vote for a prohibition on marijuana testing facilities. All those in favor of the prohibition, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. The noes have it. Again, my opinion. You want to do the 7? Good. It is not passed. 29.
I doubt it.
Well, no, you got to stand and say, I doubt it. 7 people. Okay, that's fine. You can't just say, can we have one? That's okay. 7 people stand. They say, I doubt it. If I hear 7 people, I'll stop. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay, counters, let's do it again. If you are in favor of this prohibition on marijuana testing facilities, raise your card. What, are you debating it with them now, Como? You can't change their vote, just count it. What do you got on my left? 20. 12.
28.
28. If you are against this prohibition, raise your card. Mr. Como, 12 on my left. Gentlemen, 1-7 in the middle. Again, 2/3. Mr. Levesque.
14.
14. Ms. Herrick. Need 2/3. Article 28 will be defeated when we find out what's the number. Give me the raw numbers. Go ahead, Kathy.
This one failed. There were 160 yes, 43 no, for a total of 103, and it needed 67.
Thank you. Article 29, is that where we're at?
Yep.
29, marijuana retailers.
I move the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 254.1 by inserting a new Section 254.10, parenthetical 4, entitled Marijuana Retailer, including the accompanying footnote 6 and definition of marijuana retailer as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Is there a second? Selectman.
Board of Selectmen does not recommend approval.
Finance.
Finance Committee has no recommendation.
No
We have a
recommend-
3-3 split.
Planning.
Planning Board recommends approval 3-0.
Seeing no one at the microphone, I'll declare we're ready to vote. No, I'm sorry, Ms. Adams. Well, I know, but I didn't see you. I got my head down. I'm trying to get through this.
I just wanted to say with marijuana retailer, although we seem to have consistency here in our voting, this is the one that I think would have the biggest impact on what I worry about is the perception to kids in terms of commercialization of drug use and availability of drugs in town. And so I'd just like to give another plug for the fact that this one in particular, it would be nice to have the opportunity to prohibit sales and everything that comes with it, including public safety problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shall we prohibit retailers? All those in favor of the prohibition, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. I'm going to say, never mind. Call down the vote. Call down the counters. Because it's a 2/3. It's hard to say. Counters, come on down. You getting tired, Como? Come on.
Strike.
I used to see you at the gym working out up at the high school. Come on. In favor of the prohibition, raise your cards. I can't guess them when they're 2/3. It's too hard. On my left, Mr. Como.
17.
1-7. In the middle, 1-3. On the right,
29.
how many?
29.
29. Thank you. If you are opposed to this prohibition, raise your card. Mr. Levesque, on my right.
12.
12. In the middle. 1-6. 1-5 on my left. Requires 2/3. Shall we prohibit marijuana retailing? Ms. Herrick.
We had 102 votes, needed 68 to pass, 59 yes, 43 no.
Defeated. Marijuana transporting, number 30.
I move the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 254.1 by inserting new Section 254.10, parenthetical 5, entitled Marijuana Transporter, including the accompanying footnote 7 and definition of marijuana transporter as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
There a second?
Second.
Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen do not recommend approval.
Finance.
Finance does not recommend approval.
Planning.
Recommend approval unanimously.
Tell me what a marijuana transporter is, since I'm ignorant.
It's kind of like Brinks for money. It's the equivalent. So it's somebody who does not own or control or participate in another marijuana establishment, but has drivers, vehicles, and secure facilities for transporting from one marijuana establishment to the other.
Okay. I stand educated. Declare that we're ready to vote on Article 30. All those in favor of prohibition, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. The noes have it. Not prohibited. Article 31.
I move the town...
Researchers.
Sorry, jumped the gun. I move the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg to modify Section 254.1 by inserting new Section 254.106, parenthetical, entitled Marijuana Researcher, including the accompanying footnote 8 and definition of marijuana researcher as printed in the annual town meeting warrant.
Is there a second? Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen does not recommend approval.
Finance.
We do not recommend approval.
Planning.
Recommend approval unanimously.
Marijuana researching. Prohibition. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. The noes have it. Article 32. Ooh, excise tax on marijuana. Mr. McQuaid.
I move that the town vote to accept GLC 64N3 to impose an excise tax on retail sales of marijuana for adult use at the rate of 3% of the total sales price received by marijuana retailers as a consideration of the sale of marijuana or marijuana products.
Is there a second? Selectmen.
Selectmen recommend approval.
Finance.
Finance recommends approval.
It's a majority vote, folks. I'll get to you. I was going to call on the young lady first. Just, I don't know, my mother's manners. Did you wish to speak?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Anna Locke with 91 Main Street. I have a question about the use of the income of the revenue for the tax. Can that be allocated for a specific use, or it has to go into the general fund?
Ms. Lemieux, can it be allocated? Whatever revenue there was?
Yep. I believe it can. I defer actually to the finance director.
Finance. That you, Karen?
It is.
You haven't spoken all day.
It
Let's
is.
go.
I know. I've been quiet. This would come in as a local receipt to the town, so it could be allocated for any purpose that the town could budget funds for.
All right. In that case, I would like to make an amendment that this revenue will be allocated to 2 revolving funds, where 50% of the revenue would be used by the Lunenburg Police Department to fund drug law enforcement efforts, and 50% to be used by Lunenburg Public School to develop an educational program for drug use prevention in the schools. I typed that up.
You know, we started this. You printed it out?
No, well, I typed it.
Why nobody uses a pencil anymore?
Well, you
To
don't.
put those forms on the floor for just that reason. Okay, so you want to allocate it to revolving funds. Tell me what they are.
So it would be used by the Lunenburg Police Department for drug law enforcement efforts. That's 50%, and 50% to be dedicated to the school department to develop an education program for drug use prevention in the schools. So
Before you speak on the article, do we have specific revolving funds that you're addressing?
No, it would be created.
Oh, you're creating them? Well, that's a problem.
What?
Well, because it wasn't before the body to be creating new revolving funds. So that's a little outside the scope. You can say you want the money to be given to the police department, I suppose, but not to say we're going to do a revolving fund that we don't have.
Well, this revolving fund needs to be approved by the town meeting? Okay. But can we make this allocation and approve and create the revolving fund later? I mean, it's just an order of...
Well...
I mean, I wouldn't be able to create the revolving fund if we didn't have the revenue. So at some point, something needs to go before something.
Okay, well, we don't have the revolving funds. We could
Right.
maybe create one at the next town meeting
Right.
a year from now, okay? But for your motion,
Is to just
you can't
allocate.
put it into a revolving fund we don't have.
Okay, well, so can I create a revolving fund which not be in the scope of this meeting?
You can put it in a revolving fund we have.
Okay. And, okay, let me bring that up.
Finance or Karen, somebody tell her if there's some place that makes logical sense you could put the revenues into.
What is it?
I guess I don't even know how that could be done at this point in time because we don't even know what that revenue is because it's non-existent. So typically what's done with this excise tax revenue, we have the local option meals tax, and that comes in as a local receipt, and it's estimated as part of our overall budget process. So, I mean, typically if you're going to establish a revolving fund and fund it, then you know what the amount of that revenue is. So, I mean, I think you could probably establish the fund, but you wouldn't even know what to fund it at because it hasn't
We're not
happened
creating
yet.
that, we're just allocating the future revenue, so we are not, I mean, this is just saying where the money is going to go. It's not allocating to support any activity. It's not being used in the budget.
But we don't have a revolving fund. So
Okay,
if there's
so
some
let me
other way,
get- so,
she
okay.
wants to do something.
All right,
Somebody
so-
suggest to her what she can do with this excise revenue, if there is any.
Well, I'm
Hold on
looking-
a sec. I want somebody to tell you if there's some place that will be acceptable to you. No?
I mean, I think at this point in time, the way that the statute is written, it's a general fund receipt of the town, and it's up to the town during the budget process to determine where those funds are going to go. And like I said, it wouldn't be for, well, at least right now, we wouldn't anticipate or we're not anticipating any revenue for the current year budget, so I think it would probably, I don't know how we could do anything at this point in time.
We're just we're not doing anything with the money. We're just putting the money aside to go to the police department. And we don't have any money now, so we don't have to worry about where to put it. I mean, we have funds that comes, you know, ambulance billing, 5% of ambulance services and 100% of advanced life support. It's a percentage. We are just saying where it's going to go when we have it.
But we don't have a revolving fund for where it is to go. So we can't do it.
Okay, so how about all right, so I'm just going to pick a fund here. And so, oh, this one's going to be good. Ready?
Not really, but go ahead.
Okay, this revenue will be allocated into the Green Thumb revolving fund, and it will be dedicated, 50% of the revenue will be dedicated to the police department for drug law enforcement, and 50% will be dedicated to the school department for creating a drug blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think it's kind of ironic that you're saying green thumb, which is growing plants, but that's
I know.
So, Ms. Lockwood, I don't want to take you away from this, but we're getting pretty far afield, and it's already 6:30. Is this something we can do, Town Council, what she's trying to accomplish?
Mr. Moderator, so I appreciate the effort, and I don't want to I don't want to be the one to say no, but I'm going to. So the challenge with revolving funds is that if you're going to direct the money into revolving funds, such as one of the existing funds like the Green Thumb Fund, it has to be consistent with the program or activity expenses that are payable to or from the fund. And you can see right in Article 2 that was voted earlier tonight, or this morning, that there's a reference to the expenses related to the operation of the Green Thumb program is the use of those funds, and they come from sales of items from that program. So you need to find a way to get it into one of these funds, and there's no mechanism for that. You're probably thinking more about gift funds. When funds are gifted to a municipality under 4453A, there's the ability to earmark those funds as a condition of the gift. But these aren't gift funds, these are excise taxes, and the statute specifically says that they become general fund. There is a mechanism, nothing that I don't think can be done at today's town meeting, there is a mechanism. I've got a couple of other communities that are exploring it where stabilization funds, special purpose stabilization funds can be created and the revenues can be directed, or a portion of the revenues can be directed into that fund. But that's not anything that would be within the scope of the article that's currently on the floor.
Okay, so for the future town meeting, can I create a fund that's not funded?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll see you next time.
Sir.
Thank you. Ted Turner, 322 Northfield. On the prior articles that were prohibition, a majority of the people in this room favored prohibition on every vote. However, every vote did not achieve 2/3, so they all went down. So what we've demonstrated here is that a majority of us are in favor of prohibition, but the economic interests have prevailed because we can have all this tax revenue. So we're trading public safety and our children's health for tax revenue. And so in light of the majority opinion, I would like to move that we amend Article 32 and change the rate of the excise tax from 3% to 10%. Do I have a second?
Second.
The maximum of 3%.
Pardon? 3 is the max? Okay. So unfortunately, Mr. Turner, 3 is the maximum that's allowed by law. I think that legislators were thinking that people would try to take that tact. So that's out of order. Okay? Good. Let's keep moving. 32, excise tax on retail sales, 3%. All those in favor? This is a majority, by the way. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Let's not count it. There was only 2 noes. So next is Article 33. Planning Board articles, cluster developments.
All right. I move that the town vote to amend the Code of Lunenburg, Section 255.6, which is a section of the protective bylaw entitled Cluster Development, by adding the following new subsection F thereto. F, anti-segmentation. No development or series of developments shall be segmented or phased, nor shall any contiguous parcels in single or common ownership as of or subsequent to the date of adoption herein be conveyed or otherwise transferred so as to avoid compliance with, defer, or curtail the applicability or requirements of this bylaw. It is not the form of ownership but control that determines single or common ownership hereunder, which shall expressly include ownership by affiliated or related persons and/or entities such as, but not limited to, business organizations in the same or similar ownership and joint tenancies, tenancies in common or trusts with a community or a commonality of legal or equitable interests therein.
Is there a second? Second. Selectman.
Selectman had a 2-2 vote, no majority, no recommendation.
Finance.
Finance Committee has no recommendation. We see no financial impact.
Planning Board.
Unanimous for recommend approval.
Thank you. Tell us what this is about, Mr. Burney.
So earlier today,
without all of it, if people don't need to know all
I'll
of it,
do it as quickly as possible. Earlier today, the subdivision at Arrow Estates on Howard Street was mentioned. This subdivision is the subject, or was the subject, of a long litigation. The heart of that litigation was one subdivision divided into 10 subdivisions in order to avoid the application of the cluster development. This section is intended to provide the segmentation of large parcels in and around the time that one may apply for subdivision control approval to skirt around the use of Section 5.6, which is the cluster development.
Questions for Mr. Burney on this article? Declare we're ready to vote. I'm assuming this is 2/3?
Yes, it is. It is the zoning bylaw.
All those in favor of the article, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously, actually. 34. Somebody from the ZBA.
Nope, you get stuck with me again.
Oh, well.
Oh, I don't see the... Oh, there it is. I skipped ahead too quickly. I move that the town vote to acquire by gift an approximately 0.79 acre parcel of land situated on Whalum Road, together with any improvements thereon, being shown as Parcel A on a plan of land entitled Plan of Land in Lunenburg and Leominster, Massachusetts, prepared for Whalum Road LLC, August 17, 2016. Whitman and Bingham Associates LLC, as recorded with the Worcester Northern District Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 508, page 1, for general municipal purpose under the care, custody, and control of the Parks Commission.
There's a second. Selectmen. Finance.
Finance Committee deferred. We had hoped to hear from Parks.
Want to hear from Parks. Mr. Bernie, although you're presenting this, this is a ZBA article, correct?
That is correct, and I will explain the genesis of it, and then I'll turn it over to our esteemed Parks Commissioner.
Because people want to hear from Parks.
Back in 2015, this parcel here was approved under a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B of the Mass General Laws. Many of you are aware of what that is. Currently, there are 5 apartment buildings consisting of 125 units on this parcel. As a condition of the approval, the zoning board required that this small 0.79 acre parcel be created and improved with a bus shelter and playground equipment to service the community and the residents of the comprehensive permit development. As part of that condition, they required that it be turned over to the town of Lunenburg. So in order for the condition to be satisfied, it has been brought forward to town meeting to accept the gift. I understand the Parks Commission certainly has some input.
Park Commission, Ms. Menard.
I'm going to take it down. So
please take it down. We want to hear from you.
Karen Menard, 672 Page Street, also a Park Commissioner. I do want to point out that our other 2 commissioners are here tonight, and the fact that it's tonight is a little crazy. The official stance for the Park Commission is that we do not support this article. This agreement was made without the knowledge of the Park Commission, and although we feel it was very well intentioned, it's been poorly executed. There's also been no post-inspection of the playground equipment that was installed, and therefore we feel it's a liability. So that's the official stance of the Parks Commission.
Thank you. Anyone else on this article? Okay, this is a simple majority. It's a gift. All those in favor of Article 34, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Article's defeated. 35 and 36 we'll talk about together. This is charter. Don't roll your eyes. We're going to discuss them together. We're going to do this the way we do the budget on Article 36, where I'll go by the categories. Article 35 is expected to be, but it doesn't have to be, something that's fairly non-substantive changes and things you may be able to vote on as a block. But if you need to talk about them, you are welcome to stay here all night and talk about it. Article 36 we'll go through by categories. Mr. Archambault, 35.
We have several people who are going to move this, right?
Somebody move it.
Yeah, go for it.
Ms. Luck.
I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the General Court for the enactment of special legislation revising the charter of the town of Lunenburg, adopted at the town election in 1999 and filed in the office of the Archivist of the Commonwealth, as provided in Section 12 of Chapter 43B of the General Laws, as amended by the town on May 3, 2008, and enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the General Court on October 8, 2009, and to waive the reading of the revisions as printed in the town meeting booklet.
Is there a second? Selectmen.
We recommend approval.
Finance.
Finance Committee finds no direct financial impact.
Thank you. You've got the floor, Mr. Archambault. 35, non-substantive, assumed to be changes.
Were we going to introduce number 36?
You can talk about 36, sure. You want to
Can
go
we
through...
introduce 36 like we did before? And
No,
then
we're not going to move 36 at this time. We're going to go through 35, and on 36, we'll go through it by piece.
All right, here we go.
And I'll bet
Charter
you've got a
Review
lot of
Committee.
slides. Let's cut them down. Go ahead.
We established in the May of 2017 at the annual town meeting. Our purpose was to review the current charter and make a report with our recommendations to town meeting today concerning any proposed amendments that the committee, after discussion and research, determined to be necessary or desirable. The committee was formed over the summer of 2017. You can see the original members are there. These are the members, currently at this time. I would like to thank Robert Ebersol, Mike Macklin, Katie Adams, and Michael Jeffries. They were originally on the charter and then in August moved to other things. During the last 18 months, this committee has met, reviewed, discussed, reached out, gathered information from the community and town departments. We've hosted more than 24 public committee meetings, held 3 public hearings. Many of these are all available on public access cable. We sponsored several informal surveys, created a specific charter review webpage on the website, and we've also sent out email notifications to all the town departments, and there have been notifications on the town Facebook. Today the committee is presenting its proposed recommendations for amending the charter, and we decided to break these down into 2 categories. One, Article 35, is basically typographical, legal, or definition purposes, so more of a cleanup. Number 2 is substantial changes, including realignments to current town practices and major changes. All of these changes are listed in your charter handout, and we will go over them, I suppose, individually. In Article 35, I'm going to give you just a quick recap of what the changes are. 1, substituting select board for the phrase Board of Selectmen, substituting days for months and years, replacing the short title Lunenburg Home Rule Charter with Charter of the Town of Lunenburg, adding a definition for the term days, redefining the term of quorum, adding the phrase Finance Committee to the title section 2.3 sub whatever C, providing that either written or electronic copies of proposed warrant articles may be provided to the chairperson of the Finance Committee, and it's all in your handout, but substituting the phrase Building Commissioner for the phrase Building Inspector, replacing the term affirm with ratify, replacing the term elect with appoint, stating that certain matters are the Board of Cemeteries Commissioner's sole responsibility, clarifying that the school department is exempt from the town manager administration of personnel, extending the town manager's authority to negotiate contract with employees to bargaining units subject to ratification by the select board or the selectmen, deleting unnecessary references to certain chapters of the general laws, stating that the director of municipal finance may be either the town manager or their appointee, requiring that the town manager's budget summary be mailed with the warrant to households with registered voters, changing the word affect to effect, adding a new subsection 6-5D requiring that the proposed operating budget identify all other available sources of funding, clarification that multiple member bodies post agendas of their meetings and act on items not included only in emergency circumstances, substituting the term minutes for the term journal, clarifying the process for the filling of vacancies in the membership of an appointed multiple member body, stating that the notice of vacancy required by Section 710 does not apply to those on multiple member bodies. Ooh, did I go too far? No, that's it. The next slide is dealing with Article 36, so I'll pause here.
Stop there. Questions, comments, issues with Article 35?
If I may, if you have a question, you should have the original, you should have the proposed charter in your hand with it's line numbers. So please, if possible, use the line numbers.
Sure. On the issues on Article 35, please, Mr. Rogers.
Right. I thought you were going to go through and do the same hold. That's why I didn't get up.
Okay, sure. I'm going to do that on 36. I thought there wouldn't be much on 35.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Moderator, through you, I move that we take out on 11.
Well, are you on a line in the charter?
No, I'm on the motion sheet.
On the motion sheet,
Right.
number 11,
Yep,
that would be XI,
yep.
certain members of the Board of Cemetery Commissioners, quote, sole responsibility.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I propose to take out the word certain matters and insert in its place all matters.
There is second? Second, okay. You want to speak to your motion, Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Moderator, the reason I do that is because Section B of the powers and duties says as follows. The Board of Cemetery Commissioners shall have the sole responsibility to make regulations, govern the care, superintendence, and management of all public burial grounds in Lunenburg, and to lay out existing public burial grounds and may lot out in lots or other suitable subdivision with proper paths, lanes, and ways appropriate for burial use, any other land acquired by the town for burial purposes. Okay? And the operative word here is sole. Okay? And the next sentence says, the day-to-day care and maintenance of the cemetery shall be under the supervision of the town manager. And I think that should be the cemetery commissioners. And that's why I proposed the following, or the presented changes.
Okay. There was a second on the motion. Any comment, questions about the motion? Looks like Mr. Rodquinitz.
Mr. Moderator?
Yep.
That would, if that were to occur, and the commissioners were to, for lack of a better term, run or operate the maintenance end of it, that would be in conflict with everything else that goes on at the DPW, because currently the cemetery division within the Department of Public Works has a number of lawnmowers, small tools like a weed whacker and things like that, a truck that they were offered by the DPW. What I'm saying is that they don't have the equipment to run the maintenance end of it completely. And what we do, and we think we do a pretty good job of it, is number one, burials, without a doubt, they come before everything. But as the cemetery superintendent needs things, we shift things back and forth, not at my discretion, but on my schedule, so that everything gets done. If the cemetery commission were to come in and give us a schedule of maintenance, I'm not actually sure that that could be done on that schedule. We just don't have the kind of equipment where we have two of things, so that the cemetery could do things at their discretion. If this were the case, the previous speaker, I would suggest that we look at, if we're going to gain that kind of independence, that we look at funding the cemetery so that they have more equipment, or their own equipment, so to speak.
Okay, hold on. What's a point of order?
That's not one of our recommendations.
Well, it's within the scope. Certain matters within all matters. I think that's within the scope. Okay.
Mr. Moderator?
Yep.
In response to the comment by the DPW director,
yep.
I want to go back in history real quick. This whole change in the cemetery and the Parks Department took place because some folks felt that the workers in the worker in the cemetery department had nothing to do in the wintertime, so they made it part of the DPW, and the same for the park. I'm not suggesting that anything be changed, but rather that the coordination for all the events that need to be done within the cemetery be done in concert with Mr. Holman's schedule and Jack's needs, I guess. But I think the real issue here is that if they're going to have the sole responsibility for the cemetery, That would include the maintenance and operation of the day-to-day activities, and that's the crux of the situation.
Thank you. I'll give you the last word, Mr. Rodriguez, then we're going to vote it.
I appreciate the comment. I simply don't agree. You know, we have at the department, not counting the selectmen, we have 12 people that could sort of be in charge down there because the number of the commissioners, 3 in the parks, 5 in the sewer, these are all divisions of DPW, 3 in the cemetery. I think the key word used by Mr. Rogers is in concert, and I think we do a fine job of that. In fact, the relationships with the newer cemetery commissioners has really never been better. In history, as Mr. Rogers brought up, I think in part that may have been the decision because they felt there was nothing to do. I'm not sure. I don't recall that. But I can tell you at that point, or before that happened, the cemetery was in sole direction. They would give the direction, and things were subcontracted. They got a backhoe from a local contractor. Every time they needed something, they would have to pay for it on their own. I'm not saying we're going to hold the cemetery hostage, but if they want to move in that direction, it was gathered as a DPW for efficiency and for the best use of the resources in-house. And I think that's worked as a pretty good schedule.
Excellent. On the motion, all those in favor of changing, if you look at it in your warrant, XI, otherwise known as 11, right? Change the word certain to the word all. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion's defeated. So the rest of Article 35 is still before you. Anybody else? Declare we're ready to vote. Majority vote. All those in favor of these changes that were listed, 23 numbered, in Article 35, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Article 36, somebody move it. Move it!
Someone on the select board?
Anybody? I'll move it pretty soon.
All right, let's see. Okay, Article 36. I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the General Court for the enactment of special legislation revising the charter of the Town of Lunenburg adopted at the town election in 1999 and filed in the office of the Archivist of the Commonwealth as provided in Section 12 of Chapter 43B of the General Laws as amended by the town on May 3rd, 2008, and enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the General Court on October 8th, 2009, and to waive the reading of the revisions as printed in the town meeting booklet. This is submitted by the Charter Review Committee. And the Board of Selectmen recommended approval.
Is there a second? And we heard your recommendation. Finance?
Finance finds no direct financial impact.
Okay. So I'm not going to read all the language because I'll trip over my words. You've got it in front of you, 1 through 9.
I
right?
do have slides on that.
You got a slide on it, even better.
I do.
So I'm going to sign the number. If you have a question about that number that's in front of you, yell out hold, and we'll get back to it. How many
Thank you,
is
Mr. Moderator.
All right. However many it is, Kathy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I hear a hold? On which number? 3? Thank you. Say it loud, folks. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know. Number 9 is one here, making such other changes to charter as consistent with or required by the above modifications. There's a 9. Hold was on which one? 9.
That's a 9.
On the hold on number 3, please. Address that, Mr. Luck.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane.
Can't hear you.
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. And the problem I had with deciding which number here, that changed paragraph is the closest one. These numbers don't reflect all the changes. There is a change to I'll give you the line.
If I may assist you, it's line
thank you.
528.
Line 528, Mr. Archambault?
Or 538.
538?
Excuse me, you're right, 538.
538, Mr. Luck.
Yes, okay.
Everybody following along on their program. Go ahead, what's your question or concern?
Part of that change, I have no problem with the library part of that change, but I'm speaking now on behalf of the Sewer Commission. The Sewer Commission had been in discussion on that paragraph 4.4/2-I during the process, and we wanted, before we made a request of the committee to change that paragraph, we wanted input from council. Unfortunately, a lot of things happened at the end of this process, and we didn't get that change in time for the Charter Review Committee to review it. So I would like to make a motion on behalf of the Sewer Commission, who passed this unanimously, that we, in paragraph 4-2I of the town charter, that we add Sewer Commission in the first sentence after School Committee. The issue is that that sentence would then read that the town manager would have full jurisdiction over the rental and use of all town facilities and properties except properties under the control of the School Committee and Sewer Commission and Conservation Commission. The issue being that the words that the town manager would have full jurisdiction over rental primarily and use of the sewer facilities. The question that the commission wanted to make sure was our sewer facilities, which are sewer facilities considered town facilities. If they weren't, then it wasn't an issue to us. But since the ruling of council, which makes sense, came back that they are town facilities, then that would mean, in this paragraph, if the sewer commission is not excluded, that the town manager would have full jurisdiction, which means do whatever they choose, over the rental and use of the sewer system, which is inconsistent with our regulations, it's inconsistent with past practice, and it's probably never going to be done, but we have to protect ourselves and our users against that. So that's why we are asking to be excluded from that paragraph.
Understood. So, Mr. Luck, stay at the microphone, please. Thank you. Just stay right there. Thanks. You brought this to my attention earlier today, and I've had some time to think about it because I've been up here for a long period of time. Okay? So the charter can be reviewed and amended every time we have a town meeting. People can bring forward changes to the charter. Just because it says we'll review them in 10 years doesn't mean we can't change them sooner than 10 years, okay? Adding the sewer commission to an article, a portion of the article, that didn't say anything about the sewer commission, in my opinion, is outside the scope. So I'm going to rule that motion out of order. You can change it next year. No. Mr. Prokofiev.
Mr. Moderator, Dave Proctor, 733 West Street. Number 9, by making such other changes to the charter as are consistent with or required by the above modifications thereto, as shown in the report here to reference. Seems like a blanket request to make changes in an area of what are supposed to be substantive changes. I was curious if you could just give me some indication of, are those just like de minimis changes that relate to the wording, or?
Mr. Archambault, you got 9 up there? By making such other changes to the charter as are consistent with or required by the above modifications as shown in the report.
Okay.
What do you mean by
Through
that?
you, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to defer to legal counsel.
What does it mean by that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So as you can surely appreciate, especially in a community that chooses to mail its warrants to every household, it would be impractical to print the entirety of the charter, essentially what you have in your town meeting booklets, and send it as a part of the warrant itself. So what that does is, in an effort to provide full and complete notice to the voters of what they may be asked to vote upon at town meeting, we're put in a position where we have to craft a proposed warrant article that purports to summarize all of the changes that are being made. And that's simple to do if it's a self-contained bylaw or even a self-contained new section of the charter. But in circumstances where you're making changes throughout the charter, and I think it's apparent just in the face of this document, you've got a variety of purple and brown text sort of scattered throughout the document. The effort was made to sort of encapsulate all of those changes through a series of these lowercase Roman numerals that summarize what those changes were. But there was also a recognition that in doing that, there may be minor other modifications to different sections of the charter that certainly show up in the printed document, and they're colored, in this case in brown, but that simply couldn't be included in that list, otherwise the list would be practically as long as the charter changes themselves. So that's the purpose of that. There's nothing that's being proposed that is not shown in brown text. That's why there's a reference at the end of the actual article to coming to review the document.
Nothing nefarious.
Thank you.
Sir.
I'm Alonzo, 284 Lancaster Avenue. I was making my way back to my seat, and I see I missed a hold on number 1. I hope the moderator would allow.
Go ahead.
I was at some of the charter review public hearings, and I questioned this, why the Finance Committee requirement is being changed that they be a voter in town. I think it precludes people who may have proficiency in financial matters and all financial things, municipal and otherwise, and they are just an advisory board. I don't see the requirement that they be a voter of the town in order to perform their duties as written, and I would offer an amendment that we remove that requirement of number 1.
Okay, so that's a motion that's now on the floor, basically to remove all of number 1, right? Just
Correct.
to strike 1. Okay. Does anybody
Mr.
want to
Moderator,
address-
I would defer to Terry.
Well, I didn't call on you yet, but you go ahead. You want to defer to somebody? Yes. Okay. How about another member of the committee? Ms. Birchfield.
Actually, I would have deferred to Mark, but basically when it was first brought up, it was brought up because of its presence on the page referring to town meeting, and it was our interpretation as at the time that it served a legislative function. So that was basically where it was initially brought up. I think that what we found as a committee over time when we met and discussed it was that while there was no detriment that we found, that, you know, certainly we didn't seem to lose anything, we were interpreting the intention of the people who wrote the charter, that it was assumed that members of the Finance Committee would be voters.
Mr. Moderator?
Go ahead. You moved it. Go ahead.
As a member of 2 charter review committees, I can say that we reviewed this thoroughly twice, as did your committee, and came to no such conclusion. And the only reference in the section of the legislative branch is talking about town meeting, that the town meeting will be open to all voters. But the idea of committee is it's just an advisory committee, so there's no requirement if one person, which, by the way, there is such a member on your committee now. I don't see that it serves a detriment if that person can provide information and insight into discussing things that would advise town meeting. So I see no such requirement or conflict with them not being a voter.
Right, and that's why you made the motion. Okay, so the motion that's on the floor is to strike number 1. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed? No. Motion's defeated. We now have Article 36 still before you, not amended twice. Pardon? Well, you have to stand and say 7 people have to doubt my vote. I doubt it. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 7. Okay. I could be wrong. It's happened once today. Counters. Voting only on the motion. The motion is to strike number 1 from this charter recommendation. Number 1 requires that a member of the Finance Committee, be a registered voter, right? All those in favor of striking that line, please signal by saying your card up. Those in favor of striking that line. We'll see, Mrs. Luck. We'll see. With what? I know it. On my left, 9. On my right,
6.
6. In the middle, 13. Those opposed to striking the first line. Mr. Como, how many people are opposed? 13 on my left. Keep your cards up, Senator. $12 in the center.
30.
30 on my right. 3-0, the man said, correct? Correct. Oh, well, Mrs. Luck, right again.
The amendment is defeated. 28 yes, 55 no.
Thank you. Okay, Article 36, still before you. Thankfully, no one at the microphone. All those in favor of the charter review recommendations, number 36, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We're moving on. We're going to get this done. I'm going for the record longest town meeting ever. You know, the town moderator in Westminster gets this done in 2 hours, the entire night. Number 37 is a pilot program on Electric Avenue.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to negotiate and enter into a payments in lieu of tax agreement, a pilot, pursuant to the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 38H(b), and Chapter 164, Section 1, or any other enabling authority between the town and Borrego Solar, Inc., or its successors or assigns, for personal property attributable to solar photovoltaic facilities to be installed and operated in the town of Lunenburg on land located at 190 Electric Avenue and is shown on Assessor's Map 77, Parcel 14, for a term of 20 years and on such terms and conditions and for such consideration as the Board of Selectmen deems appropriate, and further to authorize the Board of Selectmen to take such action as may be necessary to carry out the vote taken hereunder.
Is there a second? Please. Selectmen.
We recommend approval.
Finance.
Finance Committee found no direct financial impact.
Talk to me, Mr. Toll.
This is a pilot agreement between the town and Borrego Solar to level their personal property taxes over 20 years.
Sir. Oh, I think you've taken off your tie and you're relaxing now.
I went home and came back. I really wish that you would have taken the advice of the gentleman over to my right who said we should really take a recess after motion number 31.
I tried to make it into 2 meetings. Go ahead.
However, this case of a pilot agreement, and I'm kind of stunned when the Finance Committee says that there's no impact of this.
Actually, if I could respond, I think basically as part of our discussion, what we determined was since we don't have a dollar figure and we know that funds will be collected, that the financial impact really is that we have a budgeted amount that we know what is coming into the town on a regular basis, and it's not going to be a decreasing number over time because its property tax value would be going down, so would the income. So rather than have a revenue reduction over time, we felt that the pilot program provided stability in planning, and we just didn't have a number.
Okay. But wouldn't we actually bring in more if we actually taxed them appropriately?
Potentially.
You see, the reason why we went into a pilot program with the first couple that came in is because we really couldn't say no because we were not a green community at the time. And now that we're a green community, we've gone through the whole process, now that we've had to go back and change our bylaws to allow solar projects and have an actual bylaw that we passed and worked to pass, we've now met all those requirements. And there's nothing wrong with green energy, but we should not be allowing corporations to come in and make big money off of us. So I just would like the town at this point to realize there's no reason why we need to agree to a lower amount over time. There's no reason at all. They're making plenty of money as a solar company, and there's not just the solar power they're generating, that's the only part of it. But most people don't realize the town is not in a position over a barrel where they have to agree to a pilot agreement. And I would really hope that the town would think about this when they make these sorts of decisions. From what I've heard, I'm not sure if any of the members of the selectmen or the select board or whatever we're going to call them going forward understands that they do not need to go into a agreement with Borrego or anyone else at this point. They could actually tax them at a higher rate if they wish to based on the cost of their facilities, et cetera. Now, I know there's some questions with the state as to how to tax people, but it should not force us to agree to a really small amount in a pilot program or pilot agreement with them. I just don't think the town should be giving away opportunities to make money off of situations like this just because we think that's the way it's done. We've already got 3 or 4 solar projects in town. We've now got another one who wants to come back and put in a second project close to the first project, but call them 2 separate projects, because if he called them one project, then it's over the state's limit. So I just really have an issue with us giving away money. So I would really appreciate this. Either we do away with allowing pilot agreements and vote this down so that the town can appropriately, charge what is necessary, and as they would any other organization that came into town as a commercial enterprise and has millions of dollars worth of equipment and plans to make millions of dollars over the next 30 years. I would think that maybe you'd take a closer look at that.
Before you leave, I have a talent bank form for the Finance Committee, and I would love to have you apply.
Unfortunately, these meetings happen to go way too long, and we all have, jobs, careers, kids.
I know,
soccer.
but that's how it gets done.
Correct.
Okay, on the pilot. Go ahead.
Good.
Somebody.
With the pilot agreement, we're not agreeing to take less money. It's the way it works is if we don't have one, the taxation on the project is very high at the beginning, and then the panels depreciate in value over time, so we get a decreasing amount over the years. What the pilot does is level that out, and actually the amount we get each year increases with inflation, so we can count on that number and plan for the future rather than having a decreasing value.
That's perfectly acceptable. I understand that idea, but there's no reason for us to do it much lower than what it would be otherwise. There's no reason for us to make it easier for these companies to come in and put in a large-scale facility. We've all said there's no issue with having solar. We have all said there's no issue with putting it on a property, putting it on a piece of a building, on a rooftop or whatever, but we're talking about large-scale facilities here, and when they start talking about realizing we're such a great deal, they're going to put in a second large solar array in a residential, well, they actually put the first one in a residential zone, and they're going to put another one there. That just makes me wonder why we're so attractive to them. Maybe when you're making that pilot agreement, that level amount that you're putting it out for 30 years should be higher. Because I do believe we can actually bring in more if you actually tax them more those first 5 to 10 years.
Well, again, it goes through a whole negotiation with our assessors, and to my knowledge, we're not taking a loss by agreeing to these agreements. We're just leveling out how we get the funds.
And this will be on an agenda, and I will encourage you to watch for it and come to the Selectmen's meeting and speak on it.
Oh, I have.
Oh, excellent. Good. I think we're ready to vote on Article 37. All those in favor, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Passes by a clear majority, not unanimous, clear majority. Now, one of the best things we do in town, and I don't want anybody to leave, is we ask citizens to put together their own articles, their own petitions. So the next ones are all from citizens. And it's important that citizens be able to do that, so it's important that you're here for each and every one of them. And I promised one of the citizen petitioners that I would implore you that even though yours is done, not to leave before everybody got their chance to be done. So let's move on to the next article, which is a citizen's petition about rezoning the land on Leominster Shirley Road. Somebody move this article.
Steve Powell, 14 Winter Hill Road.
Mr. Powell, where are you? Oh, there you go.
Right.
Please.
I move that the town vote to amend the zoning map by rezoning portions of the land located at 131 Leominster Shirley Road from Residence B District to Commercial District, so the entire lot is in the, Commercial District. Portions of 133 Leominster Shirley Road from Office Park in Industrial District, so the entire lot is in the Commercial District.